Good afternoon, welcome to my channel. Sorry it's been a while since I've told you another story, but been quite busy working on my 50 at 50 book and launching this wonderful, well, hopefully rather wonderful thing, which is a compendium of many of the stories featured on this channel. Running Coyote, Fallen Star. It's now available on Amazon, so pick yourselves up a copy. If you've got Kindle Unlimited, it's free for an ebook, but the rather lovely paperback isn't. Anyway, sales pitch over. I will now read you a story. This is number 96, I believe. And for those of you who are thinking of entering the competition, that means you've got perhaps 4 or 5 weeks left to send me up to 5 random words, and I'll pull them from a hat and they will be incorporated in story number 100. But this is story number 96, and the 5 random words that have inspired it are, and the story is called An Arrow's Arc. King Bjorn was at his wit's end. His son Nud would inherit the kingdom in a little over a year's time, as per the traditions of their land, as Bjorn reached his 50th birthday. However, Nud had little more sense than a blood clot and was scarcely as useful. He was unruly, hasty, cruel and lazy. As things stood, he would make a terrible and despotic king. Nud ordered his classmates beaten when they outstripped him in the schoolroom, and once had a love rival's hands doused in hot tar. The only man he respected was his father. Nud had never known his kindly and wise mother, sadly. Queen Frida had gone to her eternity in childbirth, bearing her only child. In secrecy and desperation, Bjorn called his councilmen together, swore them to secrecy and relayed his fears. After some hesitancy, since no one wanted to displease even the mildest bear king on record, each councilman offered their suggestions. One thought that a spell amongst the raiding parties might instill discipline and bravery in young Nud, now just 14 summers old. Bjorn shook his head, for he feared for his son's life under such dangerous circumstances. Another adviser counselled that a severe moral tutor might be sought amongst the priesthood. Bjorn scoffed. The lad wouldn't tolerate being told what to do by anyone but himself, let alone a disciple of Odin. Bjorn was momentarily distracted from his consultation by the realization that there was another man in the room. Someone was present who'd gone quite unnoticed until now. The king was about to call for the castle guards when he recognized Halfdan, the bowyer, whom he had engaged to create a magnificent longbow for the summer solstice festival. Halfdan was sitting quietly polishing his creation, waiting for the right moment to present the elegant weapon to his king. How the bowyer had sneaked past the guards remained a mystery. I might take the boy as an apprentice, said Halfdan in that oddly diffident manner he had, if it please my liege. And so, quite unexpectedly, a solution presented itself. 2 weeks later, at the first cock's crow, a surly and yawning Nud Bjornsson presented himself at Halfdan's workshop, flanked by 2 guards Bjorn had engaged to make sure the boy attended his apprenticeship. Halfdan immediately noted that the boy was gobbling down half a pie, and tossed him a wet rag. "You'll clean those paws before touching anything inside," Halfdan warned. Nud began to protest and made as if to turn tail when the implacable guard sidestepped to bar the doorway. "Orders of the king," one guard muttered. With a shrug, Nud turned back to the bowyer. "Well, let's get on with it," he said, belching and wiping his hands on his tunic in a cursory manner. Halfdan closed his eyes, entertaining a brief fantasy of running the lad through with a barbed arrow loosed from his stoutest war bow. "Lad, you are now an honorary bowyer, an ancient and privileged guild you are ill-equipped to join. You must consider this apprenticeship contractual, and me your absolute ruler. King Bjorn has delegated your care and instruction to me." What Halfdan was saying was almost blasphemous, but to their credit, the guards did not flinch. Despite his hesitant speech, the absolute certainty in the bowyer's eyes brooked no contradiction. Nud nodded. "Let's make a damn bow then," he said. Of course it wasn't as simple as that. Nud was eager to get straight to grips with a piece of fine 6-year-aged yew, but Halfdan laughed at the concept. "First, we locate our greenwood," he stated. "Then?" the boy asked truculently. Then, you make a dozen terrible bows, Halfdan admitted. They rode out into the hazelwood behind Halfdan's shop and spent an entire day chasing down a single perfect sapling, one that grew straight, without branches, to 7 feet in height, with the circumference of Nud's spindly forearm. "Why is this taking so long?" the prince moaned towards late afternoon. "Because you cannot make a fine bow from a crooked shaft," Halfdan replied, wondering if the boy would miss his rather obvious metaphor. Nud did, of course, since he was busy tormenting a stag beetle with a couple of twigs. Once they'd identified and cut down the greenwood sapling, Halfdan spent a week taking the lad through the laborious process of stripping the shaft of its bark, locating and marking the bow's profile, and painstakingly removing layer after layer of wood with hatchet, draw knife, and rasp. The boy complained endlessly about how tedious the process was. Halfdan cursed under his breath and fought to maintain an even tone. "It takes time and effort to shape anything worthwhile. There are no shortcuts," he explained, his lesson once more falling on ignorant ears. Nud left Halfdan's workshop after the first week with hands covered in blisters, aching arms, and a determination never to return. As far as the prince was concerned, he told his designated master, he just spent a week making a cruddy fence post. Looking at Nud's first attempt at a bow shaft, Halfdan was inclined to agree. "Practice makes perfect," he offered instead. It wouldn't do to send the boy home entirely disconsolate. Nud spent a good hour that evening attempting to persuade King Bjorn that learning to handcraft a bow was pointless, thankless, and an irrelevant task, but his father remained adamant. The next morning the lad was frog-marched back to Halfdan, who set about demonstrating how to identify the string line of a bow and how to work around any knots and imperfections he might discover in the wood. "When you hit an obstacle," Halfdan said, while Nud nursed a skinned knuckle, having slipped with the rasp, "work with it, not against it. Don't fight the wood, let it instruct you. A wise craftsman listens to what the world is telling him." Nud nodded sullenly, still missing the point. Halfdan sighed. Was this child really the son of King Bjorn, the wisest ruler for centuries? 3 weeks into his apprenticeship, Halfdan took Nud to a different forest, one in which royal hunting parties habitually roamed, questing for boars and stags. Here there was an ancient yew copse, where only the royal bowyers were allowed to cut saplings. As Halfdan explained this, he led the lad to the bole of an ancient yew, its trunk twisted and convoluted like knotted rope. "This tree is over 2,000 years old," he told Nud. Remarkably, the boy's eyebrows lifted, evidence of the first genuine emotion the prince had expressed, bar boredom or frustration, since he'd entered Halfdan's charge. "Older than the kingdom?" "Considerably," Halfdan said, "and here stood its only child, cut down in its prime." He gestured to the stump where a young sapling had been removed. The boy gulped involuntarily. "What happened?" "I cut it," Halfdan said. "The wood is seasoning, has been these 6 years." "For a longbow?" the boy asked with something perilously close to enthusiasm. "Indeed, it takes time to shape a worthy shaft for a prince's bow. This will be your graduation piece." After this revelation, Nud's attitude changed. He knuckled down, learned to concentrate, discovering within himself a wellspring of effort that neither of them would have believed existed several weeks before. Halfdan saw that it was time to teach Nud the arcane art of tillering. The boy's 5th greenwood bow was passable enough to endure this process of gradually pulling the bow over a mechanism, which measured how many pounds it took to draw back the string, how far back it could readily be drawn, and, most vitally of all, the precise shape of the curve that resulted as the wood gave under applied pressure. "A good bow bends evenly on both sides, describing a perfect arc," Halfdan explained. "It does not warp or shatter." "So what makes a good bow?" Nud asked, a lump in his throat as he pulled back the rope that drew back the bowstring. There was a creak and then a crack as he did so, and his bow, drawn impetuously far, split and exploded from the tiller, a shard of wood embedding itself in Nud's wrist. The boy yelped like a kicked deer-hound. "Patience, Nud!" Halfdan shouted, reaching for a needle to draw the splinter from the prince's arm. "Your next one will be better." After 8 weeks of apprenticeship, Halfdan greeted Nud one morning with a shaft of yew in one hand, as sturdy as a shepherd's staff. "You're ready, lad," he said, quietly wondering if he was speaking the truth or just wanting rid of the boy. Halfdan hadn't spent so long in another person's company since he himself was apprenticed some 30 years prior, and it brought back uncomfortable memories. Halfdan's teacher would punish poor performance by leaving an arrowhead in the fire for 10 minutes, then pressing it against his apprentice's forearm. The scars were still vivid, hidden by Halfdan's long sleeves, memories of his youthful failings. Halfdan, of course, couldn't adopt such strategies, even if he wanted to. Over the next 2 weeks, as they approached the summer solstice, the Boyter watched the prince becoming engrossed in his task, fashioning a longbow from yew that might befit a warrior. "This is 6 summers, seasoned wood, Nud," Halfdan reminded his apprentice, "and it cannot be replaced easily. Treat it, kindly." He no longer had to underline his lessons with ham-fisted metaphors. Nud took everything in now. He listened. Halfdan dismissed the 2 guards and told them not to return. Nud no longer needed that iron reminder of his father's discipline. Remarkably soon, the perfect parenthesis of a bow began to emerge from the yew, under the timidly tender care of Nud's now calloused paws. The longbow was variegated in colour along its length, the natural division of sapwood and heartwood creating a pleasing blonde and red pairing. "Like the hair of the king and the late queen," Halfdan noted, but did not say aloud. Nud painstakingly crafted a perfectly balanced bow, moving from axe to draw knife to a blade so fine you might shave garlic with it. He tailored his creation no less than a dozen times, finessing imperfections even Halfdan had trouble seeing. A new fervour developed in the boy's eyes, a perfectionism that finally revealed that Nud was indeed the Bear King's son. Halfdan had witnessed a similar obsessiveness when the king had commissioned the ceremonial solstice longbow that now adorned the wall of his throne room. In a few days' time it would be used to shoot the first arrow of the longest day. Halfdan had never worked so long and hard to please a client. He still had the calluses to prove it. What eventually emerged after the tillering, stringing, finessing, dressing and polishing was complete was a workmanlike, if imperfect, 7-foot-tall longbow. Nud clutched it proudly, reaching for an arrow from one of Halfdan's quivers. "Not so fast, boy," Halfdan said, placing an arm on the prince's wrist. "First, you must learn the art of the fletcher." This statement saw the return of the deep sighs that were Nud's trademark. But the boy submitted far easier this time, painstakingly learning the art of turning arrow stems, forging arrowheads from molten metal, preparing and painting on the verdigris and beeswax coating, then attaching the turkey feather flights with silk. After 2 weeks' hard work, Nud's working day stretching from 8 to 10 to 13 hours, the prince had a quiver full of arrows he had made himself. Once more, Nud stood at the threshold of Halfdan's workplace, nothing between him and the testing ranges beyond, holding the bow in imitation of a military archer, eager to finally try it. "I'd better give it a go," Nud said solemnly to his master, "else how can I complete the final adjustments?" Halfdan couldn't help but smile. The boy thought he was being cunning. For a split second, the Boyter considered breaking his apprentice's bow over his knee and telling him to start from scratch, but that would be impossibly cruel. Instead, he simply nodded. Then, as Nud strung an arrow to his longbow for the first time, and the polished wood caught the late afternoon sunlight, Halfdan held up a hand. "Wait!" Nud lowered his bow obediently. "My prince, please can you, tell me what you have, learned? In fact, tell your father." Unnoticed by Nud, King Bjorn had ridden to the edge of the testing field, joined by the same 2 guards he'd first sent to mind his son. "Yes, tell me, boy," Bjorn asked sternly. Nud smiled, almost as if humouring his father. "I've learned that important decisions cannot be taken lightly, that I should listen to those with expertise, that a bow will only bend so far, and that patience is a keen virtue," he replied. "I'm not stupid, father." With that, Nud pulled back the bowstring and set loose an arrow, which launched itself skyward with impressive pace. Bjorn couldn't help but laugh aloud. It was the first time he'd ever felt proud of his offspring. Perhaps he would let his son fire the first arrow of the solstice sun. Nud's arrow arced into golden sunlight, following its inevitable trajectory, as all present held their breath, waiting to see where it might finally land. So I hope you enjoyed that. I got lost in a bit of a well of YouTube research. It's quite fascinating learning about the process of making a bow from a shaft of wood. Something I might want to do one day. Anyway, yes, if you're at all interested in the subject matter, there's a load of great YouTube videos about how to do it, and you end up with an amazing, you know, craftsman-like creation. So, yeah. Anyway, enough daydreaming. Hope you enjoyed that. I will see you again for story number 97 very soon. Thank you. Bye.